We all know the feeling of putting on an old jacket or a pair of jeans we haven't worn for a long time and finding money in the pockets that we'd completely forgotten about. It's a great surprise when it happens. Finding something when you're looking for it on purpose is always pleasant, but it doesn't beat finding valuable things by accident when you had no idea they were even there. That's an experience that everyone you're about to see in this video has in common. When a farmer lost his wedding ring while working in his field in Ballycastle, Northern Ireland, he hatched a clever plan to get it back. He had two friends who were metal detectorists, and so he contacted them to come help him search for it. Paul Reynard and Michael Gwynn never did find their farmer friend's ring, but they did find a treasure haul that was far more valuable. Buried beneath the mud of the fields was a collection of 84 old coins that dated back to the 16th century, including an ultra-rare golden coin that comes from the reign of the legendary English king Henry VIII. Experts are still in the process of valuing the coin collection, but they expect it to be worth more than £100,000 when it's all added together. It might even turn out to be the most valuable coin discovery in the history of Northern Ireland. The friends plan to cash in on their surprise discovery and split the money between them. When builders were renovating the Redland House in Chester, England in 2015, they almost threw away a priceless piece of history. The hotel thought this old wooden bed was Victorian, but also worthless, and so decided to send it to auction. The builders performing the renovation took it outside and left it in a car park where collector Ian Coulson saw it. He paid £2,000 to take it home with him, but he was suspicious about the Victorian origin story. To him, it appeared far older, and subsequent tests confirmed it. Not only does the bed come from the 15th century, but DNA tests carried out on the timber frame have conclusively proven that it once belonged to King Henry VII, who ruled England from 1457 to 1503. Now the true provenance of the bed is unknown. Antique experts believe it could be worth anything up to £20 million. For now, though, it hasn't been sold. It's on public display instead. Renovation work didn't go so well for the hotel and their valuable bed, but it went much better for a couple called Eddie and Angel in Phoenix, Arizona. They were renovating their home when they found a 4-digit code behind a medicine box in one of their rooms. They didn't think much of it until they removed a section of wall and found an old safe, and the code opened the safe immediately. Inside was a whole collection of treasure, including more than $50,000 in banknotes dating back to the 1960s. There was also a vintage bottle of bourbon from the 1960s, which was probably put in the safe at the same time, and a book called A Guide for the Perplexed. Inside that book was a further mystery. It contained an old black and white photo of a man and a map with a cross marked on it in the location of Mesa, Arizona. To make things even stranger, there was also a bingo card with the number 66 circled, and there were passages of text underlined in the book. The couple thinks it might be a coded treasure map, although they've been unable to crack the code so far. The Spanish galleon ship Atoka was supposed to be a reliable trading vessel during the 17th century, but it proved to be anything but. She needed 2 sets of repairs performed before she was even able to depart Cuba on her first ever voyage in 1620, and she didn't survive for very long. She made it to her native Spain and set off on a return trip to Colombia and back. She got to Colombia, but never completed the return leg. Having made the ill-advised decision to sail past the coast of Florida during hurricane season, she hit a squall and sank, taking her treasures with her. It wasn't until 1985 that she was found again by Mel Fisher, and all her treasures were still on board. Now, some of those treasures have been given up for auction, including the beautiful Atoka Emerald, which prestigious auction house Sotheby's estimates to have a value of around $250,000 on its own. That's just one of dozens of precious items that came out of the water, which include more jewelry, rough-cut diamonds, silver and gold objects, and even gold bullion. Mark Twain is considered to be the most significant writer in American history, so much so that his nickname is simply the Great American Novelist. Any old artifact relating to Twain is certain to be valuable, but one of the most highly prized of all turned up in a librarian's attic in Hollywood in 1991. It's an original early manuscript of Huckleberry Finn, which is largely regarded as Twain's greatest work. The 600-page-long document disappeared in mysterious circumstances during the 19th century, but an answer may now have been found. The grandfather of the librarian was a lawyer who is known to have worked on behalf of Twain during his lifetime. It would seem Twain sent him the manuscript for safekeeping and never asked for it back. The librarian had no idea it was even there and discovered it completely by chance while sorting through old possessions in the attic. It's believed that the manuscript could have a value of over $1.5 million if it was auctioned. But the librarian, who didn't wish to be named, sold it for a much lower price to the Buffalo Library to ensure it stayed in America. The Schroder Treasure is a collection of valuable items that have been turning up piece by piece since the 1980s, and bits of it are still turning up today. The story started in 1985 when a collection of gold jewelry, coins, and precious stones was discovered during renovation work in the town of Schroder, Poland. All of the pieces that make up the treasure date back to the 14th century. Construction workers were digging the foundation of a new telephone exchange when the hoard was found. But before the site could be secured, news of the discovery spread and the treasure was looted. The Polish government has made several attempts to recover the looted treasure, including offering to pay for the items and then launching criminal investigations. They believe they have most of it now, but they know that some of it is still out there. Historians say that the original owner of the treasure collection was King Charles IV of the House of Luxembourg. The king had pawned the treasure to a banker named Muschio in 1348 to raise money, but the banker died during the Black Plague, and nobody knew where he'd hidden the hoard. The collection that exists now is worth more than $100 million, but who knows how much value the missing pieces could add to it. This missing French Renaissance masterpiece hasn't been discovered recently, it's just that nobody knew its true worth until now. The old religious painting had been hanging on a kitchen wall above a hot plate in Compiègne, France for decades, before someone took a second look at it and decided to have it professionally valued. The old woman who owned it had bought it cheaply because it appealed to her Christian faith, but she thought it was a Greek piece of little value. Only when her grandson took the small framed picture to a professional was the truth revealed. It wasn't Greek, and it was much older than the family had thought. Not only that, but people had been looking for it for a very long time. This is Christ Mocked, a painting completed by Cimabue somewhere around the year 1280. It had been thought to have been missing for centuries, but was found in that humble grandmother's kitchen. It was believed that only 10 Cimabue paintings existed in the whole world. Even with the coating of dust and grease it picked up from its years over the stove, it's still worth close to $30 million. What do you see when you look at this picture? Is it just a basic old sweater? If so, you're making the same mistake as the thrift store that sold it to Sean McAvoy in Knoxville, Tennessee for 58 cents in 2014. They'd failed to look inside the West Point sweater and therefore hadn't noticed the name Vince Lombardi written on its cotton swatch. The name alone wouldn't be proof that the sweater had once belonged to the legendary football coach, but after noticing the label, McAvoy went looking for picture proof that his purchase was the real deal. He found a photo of Lombardi wearing the sweater during his coaching career in the early 1950s and contacted the uniform authentication company Mears. They confirmed that McAvoy really had bought Lombardi's old top, and so Sean immediately got in touch with an auction house to cash in on his lucky find. He was told to expect it to sell for a figure somewhere in the region of $20,000. But the sale captured the attention of several wealthy football historians, and so it went on to sell for an incredible $42,000. Not everything that's placed into a bank vault for safekeeping comes out again. Sometimes the owner of an item will pay for long-term storage but then forget about it or even pass away without coming back to collect their goods. That explains why there was so much treasure waiting to be found when British celebrity chef Jamie Oliver opened a new restaurant in Manchester, England in 2011. The chef bought a building that once belonged to the Midland Bank and set about the task of converting it into an eatery. But doing so involved breaking open the long-forgotten safes down in the vault of the abandoned building. When construction workers did so, they found more than £1 million worth of forgotten goods. Among the items were some fairly predictable finds, such as gold and jewelry, but there were also much rarer possessions, including master tapes of recordings by legendary Manchester bands New Order and Joy Division. There was even a live firearm in one of the safe boxes, and it was still loaded. It's thought that some of the valuables may have been hidden from the light in the building's basement since 1935. If you're a car enthusiast, you might already be familiar with the concept of a barn find, which is a rare or valuable vehicle that's been hidden away inside a barn for decades. Typically, barn finds exist because an owner dies or moves away without taking their goods with them, and the barn becomes abandoned. All barn finds are potentially exciting, but few in recent years have been as exciting as this Mercedes-Benz Gullwing 300 SL. This car is a product of the early 1950s, and at the time was the sleekest, most aerodynamic car that the German manufacturer had ever produced. We may never know how it came to be locked inside a dark, dirty barn in Jacksonville, Florida, but we do know it had been there for a long time. When it was finally discovered, a newspaper from 1965 was found on the passenger seat, suggesting the car hadn't moved for 54 years. Amazingly, this particular car was only the 43rd 300 SL ever built and contains a series of features that were specific to the model's very first production run. Most people don't buy full-size tanks off eBay, but then most people aren't British military enthusiast Nick Mead. The tank hobbyist has owned, restored, and traded many tanks over the course of his life, and so it was just another day in the office for him when he spotted an old Soviet T-54 tank listed on the auction website and bought it. Nick paid $37,000 to complete the purchase, and when it arrived, he set about the same process he follows every time he gets a new tank. He strips it down piece by piece to make sure it isn't dangerous and doesn't contain any live ammunition. The T-54 wasn't hiding any live ammo, but it did have something else in the fuel tank: more than $2 million worth of solid gold bullion. Mead was initially shocked, but then started to put the story together in his mind. He was aware that the tank had been sold to Iraq by the Soviet Union and had seen action during the Gulf War in 1991. He therefore concluded that he must have received a shipment of looted Kuwaiti or Iraqi gold and called the police. That meant he never got to profit from his discovery. As Elizabeth Gibson set off on her morning walk to work in the Upper Side of Manhattan one cold winter morning, she spotted a painting laying face up in a pile of garbage on the sidewalk and found herself strangely drawn to it. She can't explain why, but she felt like she needed to rescue it from the trash. And it's a very good thing that she did. It was a stolen masterpiece, and it could be worth $1 million. The work was painted by Mexican artist Rufino Tamayo in 1970 and is called Tres Personajes. 7 years after it was painted, it was sold into private hands, but was then stolen from a warehouse in 1987. After that, it was never seen again until it turned up on that sidewalk in 2007. The man who bought it in 1970 paid $55,000 for it and intended it to be a gift for his wife. He's since passed away, but Elizabeth kindly agreed to return the painting to his widow as the painting's rightful owner. Her kindness paid dividends. After being told that heightened interest in Tamayo's work meant the painting was now worth more than $1 million, the widow decided to sell it and split the proceeds with Elizabeth. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, and you will be the first to know when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.